right, we are starting tonight's call. 15 minutes late. So if you guys are just joining us to watch the recording of tonight's call, I'm coming to you from the beautiful downtown Windsor, Colorado. This is kind of fun because I can give you a little view of our downtown Main Street. I'm not sure what the temperature is. Maybe Sean can tell me. I'm sitting outside and we're improvising. But I want to introduce you all to Gotham. So Colin is someone that I met when we were doing Running Man this year. So another kind of all over the country running fanatic, awesome human being. And he has some incredible goals, an incredible story, and just in general, a great guy who has been doing all he can to just be better for himself, his family, his community. So he was someone that just touched my heart through our interactions, and I wanted to invite to share his story and motivation. And it's been fun to hear Colin's journey of going from like what a lot of us would consider like a 9-to-5 desk job, of just like the grind, but really like envisioning higher, bigger, better things to do, right? A lot of us still have these careers that we have to support our family and whatever we need to do, but also like dreaming entrepreneurial and what can I do to better impact this world and have fun and carve adventure into what I do. And that's kind of why Colin spoke to me, is because that's always been a big part of my heart. So I'm gonna mute myself so you guys don't have to hear traffic anymore. And Colin, let's hear about you.
Well, yeah, thank you. I hopefully can live up to that, but I'm just going to jump right in because I think a lot of the background and stuff comes out as part of the story. I'll share some pictures at some point as I get into it, but so yeah, thank you, Mandy, for having me. I think this is great. I love what you guys are doing here. Happy to be a part of it. So let me just step back, start June of 2021. I just had received some of the most unexpected but amazing news of my life. And that was I was going to be a dad. So ever since I was a kid, I can remember in Little League, all I wanted to do when I was playing with my dad was have a son of my own. And in July that year of 2021, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I found out that our son was due in mid-January 2022. Flash forward to September 25th, 2021, is when our lives changed forever. When my wife called me saying that something was wrong with the baby and she was bleeding. So let me just step back and go January 2021, how we get to this point. January 2021 basically started the craziest year of our lives, where it started out great. We bought a new house. I had just started a new job after leaving public accounting, making 6 figures at just the age of 27. So externally, it looked like I had everything figured out. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. In April, on my wife's birthday, no less, I was cooking tostones, which, if some of you don't know, it's a fried plantain. My wife and her family are Cuban. Things went south very fast. My wife went across the street to get sushi for her birthday, and within the 15 minutes she was gone, I proceeded to almost kill myself and blow up our brand new house in that 15 minutes. And so this, I think you can see, is basically the end result of what that looked like. So long story short, we ended up, instead of celebrating her birthday the way you normally would, we ended up in let's see if I can get this to switch, in the hospital all night, getting my hands debrided and wrapped with 3rd-degree burns all over all of my hands. So fortunately, things started to look up after that. In May, I went ring shopping. I was getting ready to propose later that year. In June, as I already told you, we found out we were pregnant right around our 3-year anniversary. In July, we found out it was a boy, and I had just been promoted at that new job. And then later in August, in Hilton Head, South Carolina, there's baby, found out we were pregnant, and then we got engaged, ready to start our lives as a family of 3, which basically brings me back to September of 2021. So we had planned a trip a couple weeks after Hilton Head with a few friends to Denver. And a few weeks beforehand, my wife was second guessing if she should go. She didn't have a lot of energy throughout most of her pregnancy. And although she wasn't sick, she just wasn't sure she was up for walking around and doing all that. And thankfully, she decided not to go. I think, like Mandy, and if any of you guys are moms, I think you've had this mother's intuition in certain circumstances where you just know, and later we come to find out that thankfully this was one of those times. So originally, I was sad. Obviously, my wife couldn't come, but she wanted me to go on the trip. So I went and just constantly checked in. Saturday, September 25th, so back where we started out as good as you could hope for. It truly was our calm before the storm. I talked to my wife early that morning, and she felt amazing. It was one of the first nights she was able to sleep and sleep well her entire pregnancy, and she had a lot of energy. So this really put me at ease. She was getting ready to go shop, get some food, and we were going out to hike in Boulder. So my friends and I were out there about 6 p.m. We were eating dinner at Bar Taco when everything changed. So I had received a text from my wife saying she wasn't feeling very well, and so I stepped out to call her. She had been having some hip pain throughout the afternoon that kept getting worse, and we just assumed it was part of normal pregnancy. As it continued to get worse, she eventually called a friend to have them come over so she wasn't alone since I was out of town, but we didn't have that much time. I think every expecting parent's worst nightmare ensued as my wife quickly called me back crying and said, "Something's wrong, I'm bleeding." I immediately broke down in shock and had never felt so helpless in my life. The one time my wife and son needed me the most, and I was halfway across the country. I tried calling everyone to help, but we couldn't get a hold of anyone. My in-laws were in Miami, over 4 hours away. My parents live in New York. None of the neighbors were around to help, and my wife's friend wouldn't be there for over 30 minutes, and we couldn't wait. At this point, it was a little after 7 o'clock in Denver, so about 9 in Tampa, and my wife decided she would drive herself to the hospital, which scared me to death because all pregnancy, when she would get blood draws during checkups, the smallest amount would make her dizzy. And now she was going to be operating a vehicle, putting herself and the baby at risk, with me unable to help. So my one hope was that there was a hospital at the end of our community just a couple minutes away where I went for my hands, and we could be on the phone for that short drive to get there to see what was happening. Now, in downtown Boulder, crying, broken, praying that everything's all right, my wife tells me as she's driving that she's not going to that hospital. To this day, I honestly still don't know what told her not to go to that hospital. She kept going and drove another 20 plus minutes down the street to another one. And that's where I get back to that mother's intuition. I know for a fact it's real just from this scenario. And so we stayed on the phone and she drove to the other hospital. So about 10 o'clock that night, she was admitted to the hospital, and I was just waiting to hear back. Obviously, mind racing, fearing the worst, hoping for the best. She called back shortly with news I couldn't comprehend. She was already 8 centimeters dilated, and the doctor said it was too late to stop it. She'd have to deliver the baby. I was pretty broken. I already wasn't there to help her when she needed me. And now she was going to give birth to our son with me halfway across the country at just 25 weeks pregnant. I had never heard of a baby being born at 25 weeks and surviving. And my immediate thought was all I ever wanted was a son. And I was never going to get to meet him. And fortunately, life has a way of showing you what's truly possible. So I I was on a red eye back to Tampa that night, but before I got on the plane, I got the news that the baby was coming. They held out as long as they could, but at 12:13, Carter was born. So my flight took off to Tampa about 45 minutes after this, and I had no update as to what was happening. And obviously so ensued the longest flight of my life. I landed in Tampa around 5 o'clock Sunday morning, drove immediately to the hospital, got to my wife, and looked down and saw this. So prior to this, we didn't have a name picked out, but Carter was always my favorite. I had a sense of pride when I saw this that was quickly removed with fear, as after 7 hours now after he was born, I still wasn't sure if I was ever going to meet him. So the doctors were able to resuscitate him, but they didn't have the ability to keep him. If any of you guys don't know, ICUs for premature babies have 5 levels. And this one only went up to 3. Carter being born at just 1.5 pounds at 25 weeks, when your lungs and organs aren't fully developed, needed level 5. So by the time I got there, he was already airlifted somewhere else. Oh, sorry, 1 second. So, doctors weren't able to tell us much. Other than that, he would have a long journey ahead of him. And no one would really know if he'd ever be fully healthy or able to live a normal life. What they did tell us, though, gave me some hope that things would turn out well, and that my wife was ultimately superhuman that night to save his life. So the placenta had spontaneously erupted and blood flow was cut off from the umbilical cord. When he was born, there was no blood left in the umbilical cord. The doctor said if he was in there for another 60 seconds, he probably wouldn't have made it. So about 7 hours after that birth, my wife was discharged and we drove to the other hospital about 45 minutes away. And so ensued the longest 137 days of our lives. And although I wouldn't wish this on anyone, it's ultimately what drove both of us to find new passions and ultimately purpose-driven lives in honor of Carter. Now, in the moment, I was just in survival mode. And of course, the questions of why is this happening to him Why is this happening to us? And why can't I take a spot? Ran through my head constantly.